What if I told you that a series of stories written in the 1800s is just as relevant today as it was then, although perhaps for a different reason? What if I told you that a story about a little wooden puppet and his quest to become a real boy was about more than that? Hi, I'm Jay, and today's episode of Fairly Odd Therapy takes an overhead view of the substance use disorder pathway through the lens of Pinocchio. Let's get to it. Hi, and welcome to today's edition of Fairly Odd Therapy. I'm Jay. Today we want to discuss substance use disorder from an overhead type approach, and what we're going to use is we're going to use Pinocchio as the backdrop for how the pathway kind of goes. Some of the people you'll meet along the way will be attributed to some of the characters in the story. So Geppetto is a wood carver, and he wants more than anything else. He wants a son. So he creates Pinocchio. And in the Disney version, after he makes Pinocchio and he sets him on the desk, the blue fairy comes in and says, Pinocchio, I will give you life, but in order to become a real boy, you have to prove yourself to be brave and true. And to help you along this quest is Jiminy Cricket. So Geppetto wakes up the next morning and he finds that Pinocchio is not in the space where he left him. So he finds Pinocchio somewhere else in the house, and Pinocchio's like, I'm alive, and Geppetto's like, yay. So and he's happy. They're both happy. And one day Pinocchio wants to go to school. So Geppetto's like, makes sense. You're a young boy. You should be going to school. Not a problem. Except there was a problem. Geppetto didn't have any money for books. And he goes and he sells his coat so that he could get money to buy Pinocchio books for school. So the next day, he sends Pinocchio off to school. And along the way, Pinocchio runs into a fox and a cat. And they ask him where he's going, and he's like, I'm going to school. And the fox and cat basically tell him school is for suckers. You don't have to do that. Wouldn't you rather have fun? And Jiminy Cricket is telling them, no, don't listen to them. Let's just go to school. The fox puts his hat on top of Jiminy Cricket so he can no longer hear him. And they convince Pinocchio to go to the fair. Well, when they get to the fair, Pinocchio realizes he doesn't have a ticket to get in. But not too far from the entrance to the fair, there's a guy who was selling old stuff or whatever. But he gives Pinocchio the idea, hey, sell me the books and you can get money to go into the fair. And that's what he does. Pinocchio goes, he sells the books, he goes into the fair, and he has a blast. So while they're at the fair, they happen up on a puppet show. And Pinocchio realizes, I'm a puppet. I can do that. So he goes up on stage and he begins dancing. And in the 1940 Disney version, this is where the whole "Got No Strings on Me" scene comes from. And but the person who's running the fair realizes that people are throwing money on stage for this stringless puppet. And he says, I'm going to make a fortune with this particular act. So they capture Pinocchio and they throw him in a cage. And then Fox and Cat are gone, right? Jiminy Cricket is trying to get him out of the cage. And the fairy shows up and she asks, what happened? And Jiminy Cricket says, tell her the truth, right? But Pinocchio starts lying. He was robbed by 2 guys. No, it was 4 guys. And they made him sell his books. And with each lie, his nose just continues to grow. Eventually, Jiminy gets through. You need to tell her the truth. The fairy's saying, really what happened? She's asking the questions. And as Pinocchio begins to tell the truth, his nose begins to return to its normal size. And so the fairy's like, okay, she waves her wand, she gets him out of the cage. She waves her wand, and he has his books back. And she's like, okay, you're on your own now, but you need to make better decisions. So Jiminy and Pinocchio are still trying to get to school, and along the way they run into a coachman. And the coachman asks Pinocchio, where you going? And Pinocchio tells him, I'm going to school. Well, why are you going there? I'm going there to learn and to grow up and to be able to do what I want to do. And the coachman says, well, we could skip all of that and you could do what you want to do right now. And Pinocchio's like, really? Coachman's like, yeah, you can skip the books, skip school. You can do what you want to right now. It's a place called Pleasure Island. Headed to myself. Excuse me. Jimmy the Cricket says, I don't think this is a good idea. But Pinocchio says, I would like very much to do what I want to do right now. And the coachman says, all the ice cream or the candy you can eat, you want to shoot pool, great. Do you want to, smoke a cigar? You can do that too. Pinocchio's like, let's go. So they ride out to Pleasure Island, and they get there, and sure enough, there are all these boys, that are doing what they want to do. Ice cream is, and candy is flowing, and the kids are doing what they want to do. Nobody seems to have a care in the world, and they're there for a few days. But Jiminy realizes that there are more and more donkeys on the island with each passing day than there are boys. So he wants to know where the boys going and where the donkeys coming from. And he happens to catch Pinocchio in mid-transformation. As it turns out, the longer that you stayed on Donkey Island, the longer that you stayed on Pleasure Island, you kind of turned into a donkey, and then the donkey was sold for labor. So Pinocchio said, like, look, we got to go back and we got to find, Geppetto. So they run back to the village and they ask, where's Geppetto? And the villagers tell them, hey, Geppetto went looking for you. You didn't come home after a few days. So he took his boat and went searching for you. Well, Jiminy and Pinocchio go looking for Geppetto. And because most of Pinocchio is still wood, he can float, and they happen up on the great whale, Monstro. And Monstro swallows them up, but inside the belly of Monstro is Geppetto. And then, so they're reunited, and Geppetto is still like, I'm glad that you're safe, relatively. I'm glad that you're here, but we got to get out of here. And they come up with the idea of making Monstro, the whale, sneeze. So they craft a fire, and the smoke inside, makes Monstro cough or sneeze or whatever, but they're spit out of the whale, and they crash up onto the shore. And it's at this time that Pinocchio, for whatever the life he had, ceased to exist, right? But the fairy shows up, says, you're proving yourself to be brave and true, and grants him his wish of being a real boy. And that's the story of Pinocchio, because after that, he's a real boy. Geppetto's happy. Pinocchio's happy. They live happily ever after, right? So we're going to look at some of the characters in this and how they can actually be seen in the pathway of substance use disorder. So you have Geppetto, who is representative of your family and your support system. They're willing to do the sacrifices. Geppetto, selling his coat so that Pinocchio could go to school. His going and searching for Pinocchio. They're willing. They didn't give up. He didn't give up. He was looking for Pinocchio, even though Pinocchio had lost his way. You have the blue fairy, who uh, just is your therapist or your NA programs, AA programs, but they're the individuals or organizations in your life that have you realize that you have to be truthful with yourself and with others. The more that Pinocchio lied, his nose grew, and of course that looks funny, and when you tell these lies to either yourself or to other people, it just gets ridiculous to a point to where individuals know that you're lying. That is to say, your nose is growing, and it just looks ridiculous because they know there's no way that you could believe what you're saying. And you notice that in the story, the fairy doesn't judge Pinocchio. The fairy doesn't accuse Pinocchio. The fairy simply asks the question, "What happened?" And as Pinocchio gave answers, the response was, "Is that so, or is that right?" And then, as Pinocchio began to tell the truth, he began to regain face, so to speak. It's already well documented that Jiminy Cricket is representative of the consciousness. And in the story, there's several points where the consciousness of Jiminy Cricket isn't heard, but that's a conscious decision, to not listen to your consciousness, right? Or listen to your conscience. That's a decision that you have to make, and Pinocchio did that along the way. And it turns out that every time he didn't, something not good would happen, right? You have Fox and Cat. These are people who pretend to be your friends and tell you, hey, there's fun to be had out here if you just follow us. But the moment that Pinocchio got in trouble, they're nowhere to be found, right? They didn't try to help him out of the cage. It was, hey, here you are, you're at the fair, have all the fun you want. And Pinocchio gets in trouble, poof, they're gone, right? And those are individuals that kind of introduce you to your addictive behavior of choice. And once you are in it, they're nowhere to be found when you start getting in trouble for it, right? There is the coachman who offers, I could give you everything you've ever wanted. I could take you to what you wanted. So everything that you wanted. So the coachman is the actual addictive behavior that kind of transports you to this place where everything that you've ever wanted is there, right? But while you are there, you slowly become, or the longer you stay there, you slowly become a donkey. And that is the behavior that the people around us see, is the donkey behavior. We see ourselves as having fun and doing what we want to do, but others see us as being a donkey. And as such, they kind of are like, you need help. You can't see what you're becoming. And if I remember correctly, in the animated version, it wasn't until Pinocchio came across a mirror or saw his reflection in water or something like that, where that's when he realized he was a donkey. Maybe no, I take that back. I think he looked at his hands. But at any rate, he did come to the realization of, hey, I'm turning into something that I'm not, and I want to get back to the people who supported me. I want to get back to the people who were looking out for me. And that's when he goes to look for Geppetto. And when they get to the village, turns out that Geppetto was looking for him. Geppetto never gave up on him. Geppetto was out there trying to find Pinocchio. Now, ending up in the well, and is, in this analogy, I'm using the belly of the well as rock bottom. in that, a whale's a huge mammal. It can travel to significant depths, some that humans can't go to on their own, at least not without, some type of mechanized device. But to be that low is indicative to me of being at rock bottom. And with Geppetto being there first, what I took from that was that sometimes your support system, your family, your friends, the people that are really looking out for you, kind of reach that point of despair before the person who's in the addictive behavior gets there. But once they get there, that support system is there. And they're saying, I'm here. I've been waiting for you to get here. So now we can get out of this together. And that's what the sneezing or the coughing of Monstro goes and does. So with Geppetto and Pinocchio being sneezed out or coughed out of Monstro, it's they're landing up on the shore, and the blue fairy shows up and sees that Pinocchio effectively has lost his life. And she says, I found you to be brave and true, and I'm going to make you a real boy. And that's what the resurgence or the resurrection of Pinocchio is about, is a rebirthing, a renewing of the person. And it's not to say that things that happened to him haven't. It's to say that you've put in the work and now you're someone different. The things that Pinocchio went through, he would have always gone through. It's his past. It'll always be his past. But it doesn't necessarily define who he is now. And that is a big takeaway from this, is that our past are our pasts, but they don't define who we are now. And that ultimately is what we can focus on in this. Is, yes, we got to where we are. We've had our cat and fox and our coachman, and we've been in cages, we've been freed, we've done all of these other things, but here we are now, and we get to be a real boy or a real person now, thanks to the work that we've put in. And with that, I'd like to conclude today's episode of Fairly Odd Therapy. We hope that you found this content enjoyable. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And until next time, take care of yourself.
If you like this video and want to see more, make sure to click the subscribe and like buttons and turn on notifications.